Hi, and welcome back to the Reef Podcast. I'm your host, LuisIpa, joined by my guest co-host, NightmareRyzing. On today's episode, we get to interview Pat Naoum. Pat Naoum is very well known in the indie game community, and he actually has been developing this game called The Master's Pupil. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this interview. Well. Welcome everybody to the Reef Podcast. I'm your host, LuisIpa, bringing you another edition of this amazing podcast. I'm joined by the one and only NightmareRyzing. Hello, Nightmare. How you doing, man? You want to introduce yourself to everybody?
I am NightmareRyzing, streamer, veteran, all around weird person.
Slash guest host, actually.
Yeah, slash guest host.
We actually got an amazing person with us today, man. We got this great indie game developer by the name of Pat. Pat, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Hey guys, how are we doing? I'm really good. It's really great to be here.
Man, thank you so much for taking the time off to actually be here because I know you're busy with your big project that's coming up, correct?
Yes, I am.
Well,
It is the Master's Pupil. It is a hand-painted 2D puzzle game set inside Claude Monet's eyeball.
That's awesome. Do you care to introduce yourself to the viewers out there in case they don't know who you are and they want to know who you are?
Yeah, basically, I am a solid dev from Sydney, Australia. I came up through visual art and the film industry, and I eventually moved to video games. And so now I'm kind of working on this game, my first game, The Master's Pupil. And it's been a kind of a long ride, but I'm kind of here and launching it soon, very soon. So it's very exciting.
That's awesome. So right away, I want to just say, that the minute I actually started playing the game, it captivated my eyes. It really did. I mean, just the visuals, the gameplay, it just completely caught my eye with the whole artistic effect. What actually can you tell us a little, like what got you into that? Like what got you into gaming designing, basically?
Well, essentially, thank you very much, first of all. That's lovely. That's sweet. Essentially, what got me into game design, like I said, I was doing art and then I was doing film, and I was looking for I've always been creative as a little kid. I was drawing and making things, little animations and whatnot, and I wanted to go into film. And what I realized, I was looking for just like an artistic expression that had a lot of different elements to it. So film, you could have animation and acting and writing and cinematography, and this whole group of things, right? But the problem with film is that you only get to, if you're a indie filmmaker, you only really get to make a couple of films a year if you're really lucky. And that's short films, not to mention kind of big feature films. That might not happen for 10 or so years. But with indie games, you can make something in your bedroom, quietly every day, once every day, an hour every day, and kind of create a rhythm and a routine that you can work on every day. And then at the end, you just have something that is quite big that can stand up, in Steam, and next to AAA games, and you can still have a kind of fully fledged game that's there and ready to go. And at the end, it has all those things that I mentioned, acting and writing and animation. And then at the end of the day, you actually get to play it. So it's kind of the ultimate art form, as far as I'm aware.
That's fascinating. That's awesome. All right, Nightmare, you have a question for Mr. Pat here as well, correct?
Yes, actually, still kind of touching in with the artistic side. What made you decide to make a hand-painted game over using stuff like Unreal Engine, stuff like that has all that stuff built in?
Look, it's a good question. It's a question I'm continually asking myself. That it takes a long time to physically hand paint a game. And I think the biggest thing I've realized is that a lot of people don't actually realize it's hand painted. I even had a guy yesterday on Twitter just said, "I've been following you for a year and I didn't even realize it was hand painted." I was like, "Mate, I've been hammering that on the socials since day dot." But I think, so it's actively hand painted and scanned in on real paper with real paint. And I've scanned it in and cut it out really intricately and put that in the game. And so I did use Unity, and Unity is pretty good for 2D 2D animation and the kind of parallax side-scrolling thing that was happening, that happens in the game. But I guess I used it was kind of two parts, and the game as a whole, set inside an eyeball as well, and being about Claude Monet, these things are kind of overlapping on itself. So originally, I had a game. I thought of the game set inside an eyeball, and I saw these like close-up images of an iris, and they were kind of fascinating. They looked like little landscapes, and I thought it would be great to have a game that would started on the edge of the iris. So I don't know if you can see everything, but you have it set on the kind of the edge of the iris, and then you walk into the middle of the pupil, and the pupil would be the end of the game. And so I had this kind of concept, and I wanted to like flesh it out. And so I thought maybe it could be set over the course of someone's lifetime as well. So you have a kind of starts on the edge of their life, it's the start of their life, and goes towards the end of their life, towards the pupil. And then I was looking around for different people I could do, and then I was thinking maybe I could do, someone that started in was like a teen or something in World War One, and then fought in World War Two, and then kind of lived through this kind of century, this last century. And then from my my art school days, I found out that I remembered Monet and how he had cataracts in his eye. Because originally I was thinking my grandfather had macular degeneration, which is a kind of eye disease, and I thought maybe that would be a good bad guy for the eye game. Kind of very abstract, but I was trying to find different ways. And then eventually I learned about Monet. I remembered Monet and how he had cataracts, and I thought that would be a great kind of bad guy as well, because I learned macular degeneration has nothing to do with the iris of an eye. It's right at the back of the eyeball, so it wasn't going to work physically in the space that I had kind of constructed. So yeah, then basically Monet, these things were kind of lining together. He also lived through a really interesting time. He was born in like the mid 1800s, and then kind of lived up until 26 or something. He died. So he kind of lived through the Industrial Revolution, which is a revolution through art that kind of started with the invention of photography, and kind of started to break down regular pretty looking art into kind of abstract colors and whatnot. So yeah, basically, long story short, it was that I kind of started overlapping all these ideas and concepts onto each other, and eventually boiled down to Monet that would fit with the eye, and had an interesting life to kind of base a game on. And then it just felt only right to be able to paint the game. And so, to match with his paintings, which are featured in the game, there's like, I think there's almost 50 of his paintings in the game. And everything else is hand painted by me. So I was kind of like painting all these little intricacies and the sprites of the game, and all sorts of things. So, yeah.
That's actually impressive. That's awesome. So I wanted to ask, I know you have on your on the Steam platform, you have it as a wish list item, for coming out. Is there any release date for this game? I know you probably get asked this a lot, but I mean, I guess just because people are so dying to play this, they're excited to play this. So any hints on when it will be?
It's very, very soon. I'm looking at, within a couple of months to release. We're just looking down the specific day. But, there is a demo up on Steam. Up on Discord at the moment, but I'm in Steam Next Fest, which is in a couple of weeks. And by then I should be able to announce the exact date. But if you, add me on any socials, Luis has obviously shared a lot of stuff in his, you can find it there. But yeah, Pat Naoum Games is where you can find it, or The Master's Pupil, you can Google that as well. And you can get the newsletter on my website as well. To
be honest with you, all you have to do is just search Master's Pupil, and your game comes out as first thing on Google. It's insane.
Look, it is, and I did nothing to get there. Like I come from web development originally, so that's how I've made my bread and butter money for the last 10 odd years. So I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to do some search engine optimization and like get this thing working for me. And then I made this website and it just appeared on top. So I think I'm lucky too, because I had the name was going to be called just Iris
Mm-hmm.
to match with the eye, and then the character in the game is called Iris. Not that that
Mm-hmm.
ever comes out, but it's just that was just internally what I was going to be calling it.
Right.
And then I found these guys on Twitter that were also had the hashtag Iris the game, and they
Mm-hmm.
were making a game called Iris. And so I approached them and I said, look, can I buy your handle and can I use that name? And they were just like, no. And I
Oh
just went,
man.
okay. Yeah, I was just like, oh, okay, sure.
Just like
All right,
just
I'll
straight
find a
up
different
no.
name. Yeah, yeah.
Damn.
And then, yeah, just cold. They ended up being quite sweet about it, but they just went like, "Oh, look, we've got the handle. That's what our game is called. Sorry, man, we got here first." So,
Ab-
okay.
abso-
Um, so a friend of mine, I started brainstorming ideas, and a friend of mine came across the Master's Pupil, which is, Monet is a master painter.
Mhm.
You can think of the character or the player as the pupil, but then it's also his actual pupil of his eye. So it was a double pun thing that was going on, and so it was kind of it was a great call, and it works really well on Google because there's nothing else called the master's pupil. So
Yeah, so basically you're unique with that. And also
yeah, exactly.
a follow-up question to the wish list. Is there a price that you have for the game yet or not yet?
A prize?
Yeah, like a how much it will cost to actually purchase the game.
Oh, a price. Yes, yes, yes. It's going to be. Oh, I'm trying to think because in Australia it's 19.99, but in America on the US dollar it's going to be like $15. I
That's the
think so, 14.99 or maybe 15.99, something like that.
that's actually not that
Um,
bad if you think about it. I mean,
yeah, and look, that was the whole point. We I hired a marketing consultant for an indie game,
Mhm.
which is part of the grant that I got, and we can talk about that later. But I hired these guys, and they suggested, I was thinking when it really boils down to it, I basically usually would like $10 of profit per game sold, and that
Mhm.
kind of thing. And they said, well, that's great because ideally you don't want to have someone buy the game and feel upset that they spent too much. And
Well,
so, like an indie game needs to be, you need to be able to sell it, and people go look at it and go, "Oh, that seems like a good price for
mhm.
a fully hand painted game that lasts 5 hours long."
I
So,
mean, I mean the fact that you actually hand painted the game makes it worth even more than $15 in my opinion. I'm not joking
Oh
with you,
yeah.
yeah,
man. Just
yeah,
because
you look,
it's rare to see a game actually be like that. So that's why, like, even if you put $30, $50, hey,
yeah, yeah.
I'm buying it just because it's hand painted.
Yeah, and I think that the idea was to come across, show people that there's value in the game, kind of go, here's the price of it, and you're not kind of charging too much. You kind of want people to go like, oh, great, that sounds good. That seems like a good deal, so I'm going to get the game and see what it's like.
Mhm.
And that whole marketing thing is quite difficult. I'm in the midst of a pretty heavy marketing at the moment, and it's a kind of because developing a game is really hard. Uh, Hand painting a game is really hard, but marketing is like the hardest thing I've ever done. It is like it is super difficult. So
That's
like it's all these little things that stack up to be the monster that is marketing, basically.
Well, you don't have to worry because over here in the Reef Podcast, the main core of the podcast itself is to promote content, promote the things that people bring as our guests, and we never ask for anything. All we ask is the guest has fun and that he actually gets the promotion that he needs, so that way he can be able to market like himself and show what he brings to the world. If that makes any sense.
You guys are the best. The best.
All right, Nightmare, you got a question?
So kind of going along with the wish list on Steam, I was kind of scrolling through Twitter on your page, and I saw it's also getting released for Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, yeah, very exciting, very, very exciting. So, part of the grant, to explain that a little bit more, the grant, Screen Australia is like a government body in Australia that supports the arts, and they've usually supported TV and film, and then they broadened out and they started introducing and pulling in games as well. So last year they opened up their first games funding, and I applied, and they loved the hand painted style and the look and feel of it. So they gave me the grant, which is mind blowing and life changing, to be frank. And it was allowed me to kind of go full time on the game, as well as hire a porting company called Noble Steed Games. They're an Australian company, and they're wonderful. And they fixed up my game, and because as coming from a solo dev, my first game, I had made this. I coded it all myself. I learned how to code, and it wasn't very good. when I first made it, the coding was just awful. It was like all these bugs and just stuff going wrong. And so hiring a company that actually knew what they were doing, they were allowed to fully bug sweep the game and fix it up, fix my dodgy, beginner code. And as part of that too, they ported to Nintendo Switch. So it's been this really like interesting kind of mechanism to kind of get into the Switch store. And like, when I sign into the developer thing, there's little Mario pops up in the corner and stuff. So it's all very surreal, being like, and Nintendo 64 was our first console when I grew up. So it was this kind of like, it's been a constant gaming, presence in my life. So being able to be on the Nintendo store is just like
mind blowing. That is mind blowing.
Yeah, it's really weird. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you actually know about how games were back then and how difficult they were, that's what makes me really happy too. I'm like, man, this guy knows, like, about how games were back then compared to games nowadays. Like,
man.
And to be frank with you, a lot of the AAA companies don't make, they make really amazing games, but you don't see that much passion anymore in those games. While if games are a giant industry. Games make more money than music and movies combined. So they are like a giant conglomerate, and they make so much money constantly. And these AAA games are the equivalent of the Avengers or Marvel movies or Disney. Like they're giant games, and they're giant companies that make a lot of money and sell a lot of copies. And so there is a kind of steamrolling effect where they just move through and they make the best game that they possibly can, and they make it for as wide an audience as they can. That means, high fidelity, realistic graphics. That means, giant, big open worlds that are as real as possible. But I think that's why indie games are so important and indie games are so interesting, is because they are kind of they can sit alongside, like I said at the start, they can, my game is going to sit alongside any Ubisoft game, any kind of big AAA game that sits on Steam. It'll be right next to it on your Steam library. But it was made by one dude in his bedroom over the course of 7 years, but it's a long time, and we can go into that later. But it's me doing it by myself, and I can make a game that sits alongside these other big games. But it is completely different. It's not high fidelity. Well, it is high fidelity, but it's not realistic graphics. It's like this abstract world, and it's all hand painted. Mm-hmm.
And it's not a big open world. It's a little linear story. And so, yeah, it's not going to have the same kind of audience, but it sits and is the same thing. You still play it with the same controller. You still experience it in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a very, very different experience than these kind of like giant, blockbuster games, basically.
Now here's the big question I had for you. So let's say your game explodes on Steam, like literally a lot of people buy it and everything, Of course, yeah, fingers crossed and everything. Would you consider actually doing DLC for the game? Like basically do like how they have so many famous painters out there. Like do like that would actually be, I'll be willing to get DLC if it comes to like that. Like, hey, let's do Masters People 2, like, basically like, from the eye of Picasso or something like that. Like, I'm not a painter. That would, honestly, like, I'm just saying, like, from what I saw, like, because painting, I was like, he could do so many painters, like, you know, from like different visuals and everything. And people, I mean, people like art in general, they really do. And you
Yeah.
doing stuff like that, I think like that would actually be a good marketing idea.
Yeah,
Especially,
look, I get asked a lot like DLC or like sequel, like what are you gonna do next? Especially now that I've kind of wrapped up the main production of the game. And you know, I always joke like, yeah, this one's in Monet's eyeball. The next one will be Van Gogh's ear, so he cuts it off at the end. You know, there's Frida Kahlo. She had the eyebrows. You could base it on Frida Kahlo's eyebrows. But I think in general, like the hand painted game, it takes so long, and and I think the slight madness I had of doing this and completing this is only possible to start if you have never done it before.
Mhm.
So, having never painted a game, I was like, yeah, I'm going to paint a game. That'd be a great idea. And then I painted it, and now I've, got sore wrists, and I'm kind of like covered
Oh,
in paint, metaphorically. And I'm kind of, well, I think I need to give it a rest, the
mhm,
painted game. Maybe I'll come back to it, and maybe I'll use it as textures in the next game. But
mhm.
for the moment, a hand painted 2D game like this, I think is uh, I think I'm done for now, at least.
I got you. All right. So this is actually not a game related question, but I mean, what actually got you like to decide like, you know, hey, I want to go into the video game industry?
Yeah, I think similar to what I was saying before, but basically what got me into the industry is I wanted something to craft and to make by myself in my room, you
Mhm,
know. And I've always been after doing something for my own sake. I've always done I always say I've never had a real job because I got out of uni and I worked in like Blockbuster Video, essentially Civic Video in Australia,
mhm,
and then I went to uni and I started doing freelance graphic design work, and I was doing you know creative work, and it was really interesting, and I was making logos and book covers and posters and that kind of thing, and I really enjoyed it, and I still do really enjoy it. But there comes a point where you're making art for a client, and
mhm.
that becomes kind of humdrum. It becomes a bit tiring, and it kind of you're never actually making your own art. You're making someone else's art, and you have to uh, follow their instructions and their wants and needs. So
Mhm,
when I was doing film and I was fiddling around with writing scripts and making little short films,
mhm.
and some of them are okay. Like I was proud of them, but it just took so long, and so I wanted something that was kind of big and fun and interesting. Um, but you can't make that if you're a student filmmaker or a indie filmmaker. You have to make something that's very personable and neat. You can't set it in like you know an eyeball or like on the moon. You have to have a very serious way of making films. So um, I kind of wanted to make something big and bombastic and interesting, but you can't do that in other mediums. So I kind of zeroed down on gaming, and it was around the time of Braid and Limbo. That was now they're like it's almost 10 years ago, and I thought that indie apocalypse that happened in the early 2000s or late 2000s, um, and it was kind of this uh, explosion of like really interesting games that are made by one or two people, and it just made me think, oh, I could probably do that. Maybe let's see what happens, and I kind of dived into learning how to code, and it started from there essentially.
All right, Nightmare, you have a question?
Something I was thinking about here, with you being in Australia, the game coming out within the next couple months. I know October is PAX in Australia. Are you
Yeah.
looking at going there to kind of promote as well, or
Unfortunately, I can't go to PAX. So I part of this game has been this kind of long process, and especially like there's been a lot of delays in getting it out. Because every time I go, oh, I'm gonna put it out in like originally, I think one of the most solid dates is going to be March this year. But before COVID, we were me and my partner were intending to go overseas, and we're actually going to get a green card and come and try and live in New York for a while, and experience the US, and then try go traveling and whatnot. And then COVID happened, and we just had to stay home and hold up. So eventually we kind of pushed it back, this moving date, and had different plans. But eventually it got to the point where this game kept getting pushed back and pushed back, and then my girlfriend was like, "We need to go. We need to go at some point." So we've marked the date, and we're gonna leave on the in August. So we're going to kind of like jet out. So the game's gonna come out, and then the game we'll head off, and we're gonna head off to Europe, and we'll be kind of living abroad for like a year or so. So there's PAX that I'm missing out on. There's GCAP, which is the Gamescom in Berlin. We're going to be missing out on. I have gotten into South by Southwest in Australia, which is like the first time. I think it started in Texas. It's the first time they're doing it in the Southern Hemisphere in Australia. So yeah, South by Southwest. I'll be there as well.
Well, we actually have a first-time chatter here on the live broadcast. He says, I love this, and the man here, it is like the perfect evolution of beard growth.
I can see it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you definitely
I
have to
shaved mine off today.
see mine. Actually, like, when I let it grow, I usually like growing just this right here, and believe it or not, it gets gray. So that's why I actually kind of trim it. Yeah, like all this turns gray, so I'm like, oh no, I don't want that. I'm about to be 35. I don't want to be a 60-year-old person, like look like a 60-year-old person. Another question I have here, I mean, this is not like game related as well. I never got to ask, are you a morning person or are you a night person when it comes to like when you actually do stuff?
Very much a night person. So so in Australia right now it's 9:23 a.m. So even this, it's not that late, and I'm still kind of like trying to wake up and be a functioning human a little bit. But definitely very much a night person. All
right. If you're a night person, what is your go-to snack at night?
My go-to snack at night. So, okay, this is a bit weird because Americans don't really get it. But have you ever heard of Vegemite in America? So Vegemite is a yeast paste. I know it sounds delicious. Hold your applause. But it is like it's like a black paste that you wipe on toast, and you have a little bit of it, and it's like really salty, and you have a bit of it on toast with butter, and it is so good, and Australians love it because we're a bunch of weirdos, and so it's phenomenal, and that's definitely my late night snack for sure.
Gotcha. Also, I want to thank our sponsors here that we have. We have W Energy, who actually sponsors the Reef Podcast, and we also have Sign Esports. And I wanted to let everybody know too that I want to thank this guy right here next to me, Mr. Nightmare, for sticking with me for like the last couple podcasts. So shout out to you. And I also want to shout out to Pat for being here early morning. And like now that he told me that he's a night owl, now I actually feel bad for waking him up so early. But I appreciate you coming in here and let us know. But anything that you would like to ask us as a podcast in whole, like in general?
Look, it's great hearing the sponsors come up as well because I've listened to a couple of you guys, especially when I first, you first reached out to me on Twitter, which was what, a year ago?
I would say a year ago, yeah.
Yeah, about a year ago. Mm-hmm. And you streamed the demo, and
don't be surprised if I play it again. Just because I want the full game.
Well, I was thinking you'll definitely have to play it, around launch. I'll get you to play. I think I'm gonna tell all the streamers to play the first 5 levels or so online. Mm-hmm. So I'll definitely, you're definitely on my list for that because that'll be a fun, that's more of the game and it's, not too much, so people will get ruined, but more enticing, an extra little section.
Oh man!
Plus, I've redone the background of the first level too, so it's even the first level looks a little bit nicer and a little bit more lovely. So
not only is the game polished, but I mean, one thing I also enjoyed was the background music. The background music is really good, really.
Yeah. That's my man, Stephen Shoughton. So you can find him online called Misty Lane. So as if like not a street but a lane, and it's all misty lanes. And he is the best. He is like a genius musician that I've known for years and years, and he's just prolific. He can make music. He just makes all this kind of different types of music, and so I had talked to him a long time about making the game and about the creative process of making games, and we always talk creative process of like his writing, his music making, and like I play guitar and I play music and I can play a little piano and harmonica and whatnot, but uh, I was like, I'm doing everything in this game. There's no need to do all the music as well. So I got him to get on and do the music, which has been this like really enjoyable, lovely thing. And he made the best music that I could dream of. So it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm guessing like he's one of the people that you actually want to give a shout out to. So I was gonna get to that. Is there anybody else besides Steven that you want to give a shout out to that you think deserves the recognition?
Well, obviously all my friends and family have been this kind of like amazing support. They're just, like I said, my sweet girlfriend who's just been kind of, she's been suffering while I make this like ridiculously long game and, delaying our life plans so we can make this. That's always wonderful. But, even like my parents are just fantastic people that like, made this possible because very early on they were kind of like really supportive and really like just do whatever you want, man. Just do it. Like don't feel you have to go become a doctor and like or a lawyer, or not that I could have been those things, but I went through an art kind of background and I went through that way because they were like, just do it, man, go for it. And so yeah, they're wonderful. I did shout out the Noble Steed Games. They're just this wonderful company in Australia. And they're kind of work internationally. So if you're an indie dev and you're looking for porting or like any kind of help with anything big or small, they're the people. Noble Steed, like, a horse. Noble Steed Games. They're wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but otherwise it's just been this process of, of being a solo dev and doing everything myself. I do have to shout out my business partner. So I have a company called Red Tally Studios, and that's the graphic design and web design company that I created, 7-8 years ago now. And my business partner Craig Berry, he's helped very early on. So early on with the coding, I was basically kind of making up as I go along, and I was learning how to code. So the game, I always say the game took 7 years. It's taken a bit longer than that because that's when I first came up with the idea, was a long time ago. But 7 years ago, I started working like pretty actively on the game, and that was like weekends and like afternoons and evenings and whatnot here and there. But the first 3 years was just learning how to code, and so I was kind of just chipping away and learning how to like actively do dev and learn how to work Unity and stuff like this. So there's this kind of long process. But my business partner Craig, he's a developer, he's a coder, and he's a bit of a wizard. And so I would just constantly be pestering him with really annoying answers, like questions about what's a for loop and how does like if I'll save this and then how do I pull it back over here? And he's like, I don't know, man. Here's how you Google it. And like so he was very patient as well. Big shout out to him.
That's good. I mean, they always say practice makes perfect, like, when you actually have so many things that you're doing. Like for me, I personally didn't know how to like run a podcast on Spotify and all these platforms. I literally went on YouTube. I was like, I need to learn how to do this myself, because if I go to somebody, they're going to be like, hey, Google yourself, Google this, Google that.
Yeah.
And
I think, yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, and that's how I actually learn. And now when people actually ask me, like, hey, I'm thinking about running a podcast, how do you do it? And then I literally coach them. I tell them, like, look, you do this, you do that. And then, like, I don't go around telling, like, hey, Google or anything, because I love teaching people things that I learn myself, or if I learn from other people, I like to basically go in a chain and basically follow, like, basically tell them, like, hey, this is how you do it. Once you learn, you can teach other people as well, and the chain keeps going and going, and it never stops.
Yeah, and like I think I tried to learn coding at uni. I did it like a little semester where I did a bit of coding, and I failed that degree. Like I like not that degree, but the that segment that semester I failed, and um and it was a bunch of artists trying to do like these art painting kids trying to do like coding, and so we all kind of went really badly. But years later, when I really decided, when I had found a love and a reason to do this really hard thing, I
Mhm.
found that was really like a lot easier to do and easier to learn these things. And so I think you're the same, right? It's like you found all these things you're talking about really difficult to do, but when you really want to do them and you're really kind of motivated and interested in the subject, then I don't know. The goalposts can be super high, and you're still going to get it because you're going to want to do it. You're like actively trying to seek it.
Exactly.
And yeah.
I mean, it's always good to do it because I mean, if you have a passion for something, something is gonna grow. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like any content creator out there, or like YouTuber or game designer. They basically keep working on things, and then people are gonna notice. I mean, it may not start like like top of the food chain. That's what I call it. But I mean, you're gonna work your way up there, and then people are gonna recognize like your hard work and be like, "Oh, this guy's been doing this for so long. I'm actually interested. Like, it's intriguing."
Yeah, totally. And like going back to what I was saying before about my parents, is like early on they just said, even from when I was a little kid, do what you want to do, keep doing what you want to do, because they knew it was like I wasn't gonna I wasn't gonna try and become a, I don't know, accountant or like something that's difficult and requires that amount of attention and skill if I didn't really like it. So
Mhm.
I think it just comes down to how much you love something, really. And so if you can keep going and keep doing it, eventually you'll get recognition and success.
Yeah, like one of my main big goals that I have this year is actually to get my podcast to be on satellite radio. So that way I don't have to do it on Twitch and actually do it on radio itself. Like, just so
Yeah, right.
so that way like everyone will like, "Oh, snap, he has a radio station dedicated to this now." And
That's
but I
right.
mean, I've been doing this for 3 years, podcast wise.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if you actually look at the VODs from the very beginning to now, it's like a whole new level. Like, we went from
yeah.
no cameras, no nothing, just mic. That's all we had, just a mic. And now we basically are at the point that we can use cameras. We basically like can show guests like where to find us and everything. And believe it or not, some people in my local hometown where I live right now have recognized like me from the podcast. They're like, "Hey, you're the guy from this podcast." So I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's me." So like they're like, "Hey, let me take a picture with you. I want to take a picture with you." I was like, "Sure, why not? I mean, I don't mind." But I mean, I just find at first, honestly, I found it awkward. But I mean, it's a good awkward. It's like, dude, that's crazy that people are actually listening in now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally, totally. That's
Mhm.
fantastic.
But I was gonna say, I know you mentioned like how you're doing a lot of marketing and everything. But would you ever do T-shirts or merchandise of Masters People?
I definitely thought about it, and I don't think it's something that is entirely off the table. I think I just haven't been able to like mentally process how to do that.
Mhm.
Not how to do it, but like jump into that and start it out, because I think I'd like a shirt, especially
Mhm.
like a simple like stuff.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of my indie game developers here in Australia that are quite they make like little shirts up, and they've made stuff that they specifically for kind of for them to wear, but they do have merch that they sell. And so
Mhm.
um I definitely want to do it, but I think it's I've got to, I think I might release the game, and if it's really popular, then
Mhm.
I'll make up some shirts and
Well,
maybe a good enamel pin or something. It'd be good.
Well, just let us know when you actually decide to do that because I'll definitely add one
Thank you.
to a card for sure. Just because I
Oh yeah.
mean
Thank you.
it'll be great to support it. All right, Nightmare, you have any questions here?
So we've talked about, like, touched on it a lot, the whole 7 year process that it's taken. What's been the biggest motivation to keep going? Just it taking the 7 year process.
Yeah, look, that's a it's an interesting question, and it's a question I've been asked a fair amount too, because it's a strange one, I think. Because all the advice online is that you make a make little games. Don't make games that go for 7 years, basically, because it's essentially you will get burnt out if you make a big game. And so I kind of came into the process of like hearing this constantly and wanting to make video games that were kind of bigger and more interesting, but not wanting to make these like little, you know, one concept kind of games. And for better or for worse, early on I decided I'm going to just, in my mind, make several little games and then stitch it together and make one kind of big game. And what I ended up doing was making these separate levels that kind of flow on from one another, and a basic kind of linear story and a linear kind of progression through the mechanics and the puzzles of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But they're kind of separate little items, and so I was like learning as I go, and I had to come back and fix stuff as I went along. But basically, I the motivation, to answer your question, basically, the motivation for me has been this kind of is the idea of making something big and making something that's kind of solid and stands by itself, and isn't kind of going back to that idea of making short films and stuff. That it always like upset me, or not upset me, but kind of it didn't sit with me right that I had to make this like little version of something first. Why couldn't I just make the bigger one? Jump straight to that. And look, I don't think 7 years is a long time, and it's like, it was not even part-time for the first 3 years, and then 4 years was about, I started with like an hour a day at 4 p.m. I'd stop and I'd work on the game, and that eventually like got bigger and bigger and bigger until I would stop at like after lunch and then go onto the game. And so that was about 4 years. And then last year I got the grant, so and that enabled me to go full time and really power through the last bits of it. But in my mind, the motivation always came from just doing something big and chipping away at it. I look at it as like this giant piece of marble that I was just like every day like, and being able to kind of really chip away at these tiny little parts of something much, much bigger. And that kind of gave me a motivation. I don't know if that would motivate a lot of people, but it did for me. It worked for me.
I mean, the fact that you actually had different parts of the game and then basically connect them like a puzzle and make it into one huge game is what I find unique. I really do. But,
and it was very much like stepping forward. I had this idea of having it last over someone's life, over Monet's life eventually. And he had quite an interesting life. So he had all these things happen to him. He lost a wife really early on. She died of tuberculosis or something. So, she died quite young, and he had these two kids, and then he met this other woman, and then it was kind of this, a very elaborate thing. And then his son went to war. He escaped war in various fights. So, and he also got typhoid. That's that big monster you fight in the third level there.
That's my arch nemesis right now.
Yeah, that weird crab thing. So that's there was all these like elements in his life that I wanted to do. So I kind of basically knew the structure of the story, but when it came down to the individual levels, it was a fiddling with mechanics. So I'd come up with a new mechanic, say it would be the switch, thing. And so I was like, how do I introduce this switch, and how do they work? And so I'd fiddle with the mechanics of it and go online and make little, on the computer and make little like prototypes, and then I would start fiddling with them and making little puzzles. And so those like mechanics, they kind of then started building those little, like I was saying, those little games and making like one after another. And in a way, it helped with building the game and making it make sense to people, because I was also learning the mechanics and building the mechanics as I went. So each little level and each puzzle, one after another, are all designed to be easy for someone to walk through and to understand each one. Now, not that you're going to just breeze through it. You're going to have to. There are puzzles that you have to learn, but especially like I've been watching a lot of people play the first three levels when I'm playtesting or going to events and having the demo up for people to play. And it's really fascinating watching like high level gamers breeze through the first level, and then I've had a couple of them be like, "Oh, it's a bit easy," and I'm like, "Well, it's level one, right? If it was level one was blisteringly hard, you wouldn't want to play it anymore. So, hold on to your socks and like have a go because
Mm.
it'll get harder as it
See,
goes."
see
So,
that's the thing about gamers nowadays. They think like after they beat a level, they're like, "Oh, it's really easy, it's really simple," and then when they get to the next one, they're like, "Oh, fudge! Like this is actually getting challenging now. Like it's getting difficult."
totally.
I wanted to address just so you know that right now, live on the podcast, right next to you, like on your camera, we have a GIF of your game actually playing in the background. Yeah, this way.
Hi.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right there. So we wanted to, I wanted to show that like so that way people can see what it looks like. And I found that online. I put like, Masters People GIF and that came up. So like, hey, let's surprise him with this and put the game there so that way people can see it.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
think it does help. Like, the visuals of the game are definitely something that has drawn people in because, indie games, like I was saying, marketing is like the hardest part of indie development, I think. And having something like a visual hook for the game makes it, super interesting. So I think, and it draws people in. And if you have I can say it's a hand painted game as much as I like, but unless people see it and actually see the texture of the paint on screen, they kind of like don't realize. And I've had a lot of people see it quite small. Obviously, like a lot of stuff on Twitter when I started first posting stuff up, it was quite small. It's obviously small on your screen, but I also had like very large shots that I would just like put up there. But I've since started cropping them in a bit because really you can't actively see the texture of the paint because it's not there on screen. So, the more things and that kind of stuff that comes across to people, it draws people in. So,
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
And the good thing is that, like, like you said, I mean, when people actually see that you're getting interviewed, like, and there's no, like, visuals of the game that they want to see, like, they're like, well, we want to see what it looks like. So that's what I was thinking, like, throughout the week this week before we were planning, like, the whole interview. I was like, okay, I need to find a way to showcase who you are, but also show what your game is so that way people know, oh, this is what the game looks like. Because because I mean, a lot of people they might think like in their brain, okay, I see the visuals and everything, but I want to actually see what it looks like.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely. So if you're listening to this in a week or a year or 10 years from now on Spotify or on whatever you get your podcasts, go Google it, guys. Come on, The Master's Pupil. Go have a look at it. It's still available, probably. Hopefully. So yeah, go have a look at it. It's hand painted. Looks pretty.
And I mean, like I said, I mean, some of the levels that I tried, man, they really gave me a headache. Like I was like, dude, but I couldn't give up though.
It's actually a bit of a worry. Like it's not a worry, but it's I've had a lot of people test it, and I've had a lot of testing where I've been sitting in the room and testing people or watching them play, and I think there's a lot of stubbornness. If you have the person that made the game sitting over your shoulder and watching you play, there's a lot of stubbornness to like get it and make it and like learn the puzzle and like beat the puzzle. But without that, you can have, I think people will play it and then they'll get a little bit stumped and they'll be like, oh, I'll put it down and see what happens, and come back to it. But I'm interested to see how hard people find the game because it's a puzzle game. It's about, I've always talked about it, the aha moment. So, you're chipping away at a puzzle and you're like trying to work it out and you're getting a little bit frustrated. And then it clicks and you know the solution and you go, aha! That's the moment that's the moment I love, right? That's gold. That is like puzzle makers' dreams. So, I have always loved that in puzzle games. I first played Limbo and Braid, that like really specific kind of puzzle. And you have to get a little bit frustrated to then get this like reward of like solving the problem. And yeah, it's part of the beauty of puzzle games, I think, for sure.
So if I had to guess, whenever you actually showcase the demo, like in person, I bet you actually were laughing in your on your mind, like saying, "Oh my gosh, they can't solve this," and you were just like like just like because I mean that happens a lot to me when I play games and I do not know how to solve one, and I have friends coming watch me play games and everything. Like, dude, this like they just start laughing. I'm like, why are you laughing? Like, because we know what to do, but you don't know what to do. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
it's kind of it is strange because it's there's this like like two-sided because on some parts, I know the answer and but like that's the whole point, right? I made it. It's different from just knowing the answer of how to solve something, um, and having kind of uh, that insider knowledge is nice, but it also makes you a little bit nervous because you kind of like you don't want them to be too frustrated. That's the key. There needs to be a little bit of frustration, but not too much. And so you're sitting there, I'm sitting there like watching them being like, oh, they'll get it. They'll get it. They'll eventually get there. Because you don't want them to rage quit. You don't want someone to just go, nah, man, I'm out. That sucks. I'm
I
over
think
it. You want.
I think when I played the demo, I was at a point that I was like that. I was like, dude, I'm about to give up. Like this is too much. And then you gave me a hint. I was like, okay, now I kind of see what's going on.
Yeah.
But
And
I mean,
usually it's not something like that's like a big logical problem. It's not like someone actively can't solve it, but
mhm,
sometimes they're just not seeing the very, very small. If they just looked at it just a slightly different way, they'll understand. Like there's a level I think in there's one puzzle particularly I'm thinking of is in the later levels in level 6 or 7 or something,
mhm,
and it's it was a puzzle I came up with at the very end. Basically, I had done most of the game, and then I came up with this idea of a puzzle, and I was like, I need to put this somewhere. It's too good to leave out. So I made a little room. I moved stuff out of the room, and I put this puzzle in. And it is literally people talk about trying to think outside of the box, and it's literally that you not that there's a box. It's not actually moving something outside of it, but you have to. There's the puzzle laid out from you, and you think it's one way, and then you have to kind of reassess what is actually happening in the entire scene and try and work it out.
mhm,
And I think that's a difficult thing for people to do. Once you get an idea of how something functions, that's set in your mind. So you're not going to kind of try and think of your brain will just try and solve the problem that you think is in front of you. But in reality, there's a way to solve it that has nothing to do with what you're seeing, and you can kind of uh, broaden out and try and get a way of different different thinking outside of the box and trying to come up with solutions. And it's another reason why puzzle games are just great, basically.
mhm. All right. So Nightmare, do you have a final question to ask Pat here?
A little bit. Go and put you on the spot here because I've been noticing the painting behind you.
This painting, yes.
Yes. So was that made during the game development or?
This isn't my painting, actually.
Oh,
I
it's
should have
not.
probably put up my paintings. No, this
Uh,
is Pixie Nut. She is a Australian painter, and she is wonderful. That's PixieNut, Pixie Nut, and she's amazing. She's really good. I probably should have put up my paintings around it because I still have the physical paintings from the game, and they're quite interesting to see. But alas, I was not savvy enough to blue tack up my paintings behind me.
Well, I figured I would actually let you know that if you ever need help, like with the whole marketing T-shirts and things like that, you're part of the Discord now, so feel free to reach out anytime. I mean,
Thank you very much.
if I don't respond right away, just I'll respond right when I finish work, or if I'm busy, I'll respond right away. Cause
Thank you, man. Yeah. Look, one of these days I'm gonna get to it. One of these days I'll have shirts and
yeah, because I was thinking
the whole.
for a shirt design, I would actually think just a regular black different color T-shirts with the white lettering of Masters People, just
Yeah.
simple like that, something to
Yeah.
because
I was also loving. I love the idea of like the Masters people in the back, and then on the front, just on the little like breast, having the little
the little
you
guy.
know, the little guy, little iris there running along. Cool. In the running pose.
Oh, that would be funny. So, all right. Before we actually get to the questions that people have, because I'm pretty sure, like, people are probably gonna get ready to ask in a couple of minutes. We're gonna get to the funny but interesting questions that we have here
Okay,
ready
I'm
for you.
ready.
All right. So, question number one: do you approve of pineapples on pizza?
Okay, this is a hard one because like it's one of the most favorite pizzas in Australia, the Hawaiian pizza.
Really?
Um, yeah, it's one of the most popular pizzas in Australia, which is weird. And it's called the Hawaiian pizza, and it was invented in Canada, and it's
Hmm.
the most favorite pizza in Australia. And I just think that's like internationally a weird thing.
Mhm.
So a Hawaiian pizza that's just like pineapple, ham, and cheese.
Mhm.
I don't know. Take it or leave it. I'm not interested. But little bits of pineapple on a supreme pizza where it has like bits of everything and like little bits of pineapple.
Perfect.
I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Yeah. Okay. If you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
Look, it's flying. Everyone always goes, "Oh, I want to be invisible so I can sneak into banks and shit." And I'm like, "Oh, excuse my language." But I think I would go flying because then you can fly. You can fly around. I don't care if things would be super like you could steal money and do all this stuff. I
Mhm.
just really want to fly around. Like it would be awesome.
Especially like,
Now,
visit new places.
yeah, you could just glide and get a coffee. Like you would just glide to the bathroom. You just like float over. Like I'd glide everywhere. It'd just be so casual and rad.
Mhm.
But I do like the idea of like being able to like Dr. Manhattan from The Watchmen, the big
Mhm.
blue dude,
Mhm.
and he could just like make anything. He just kind of goes and just makes stuff out of thin air and like love. That would be great too. I want to be able to do that.
That's awesome. All right. This is actually a quite question that gets everybody like kind of like thinking for a second. So,
Mhm.
okay, you're in the middle of a forest, okay? And you see a giant bear-sized goose. Would you fight that, or would you fight 100 goose-sized bears?
Okay.
You can't use anything, only your bare fists.
Only my fists. One bear-sized goose or 100
Goose-sized bears.
goose-sized bears. Look, I don't think I'm surviving either way, right? Let's be real. I'm a game developer. I'm not a fighter. Like, I'm gonna die. And I think maybe the key of this is actually how quickly you can die,
Mhm.
because you really don't want to like draw this out. You
Mhm.
know, if I were to fight, like bears are vicious and geese are also vicious. Because I've heard this question before. Do you fight? It's ducks and horses. Do you fight 100? You know, duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck? And I was like, a horse-sized duck would mess you up. It would take you out and kill you. But I reckon I could, if I had some good shoes on, I'm punting, kicking the hell out of these duck-sized horses, right? Just going to town like I'm like playing a proper game of soccer. Now, the reverse is that you're 100, like this question, which is geese and bears, you've just upped the ante because bears are way more vicious than horses, and geese are way more vicious than ducks, and bigger. So what you're really fighting is here just 100 wolverines, and like there's no way, there's no way I'm surviving that. Now, a a goose that's the size of a bear, that thing's gonna, it's vicious when it's like knee high or they're bigger. So like this thing's gonna take me out real quick, and maybe that's the key. Is just go for the giant goose and just stand there and hope it just pecks you in one, and then you're out, and you don't have to be mauled by 100 tiny grizzly bears. I think that's the key. Just go
now,
out quickly.
now, did you know that a truth? I mean, it's a theory. I haven't tried it yet, but did you know that if you point the green laser pointer at a geese's feet, it actually makes them run away. It makes them like they get feared.
By the green laser pointer.
Yeah.
Well, you said I could only have my hands. I didn't realize the laser
No,
pointers
no,
were
no,
part
no,
of the
no. I'm
option.
just saying, like, that's actually like if you, I mean, I'm just saying, like, if you could like actually see one that big, you would literally go, point the laser beam
it.
at their feet, and they will run away. They'll get
So if
intimidated.
anyone's listening right now and you're having a problem with your local goose, this is the way to solve it. Green laser pointer at their feet. Bing bang boom, no more goose problems.
Yeah, they'll definitely get intimidated. All right, and final question I have here is, okay, I know you don't like the morning much, but do you ever eat cereal?
I don't eat cereal. Okay? I know that this is like a big thing with people. They love a little cereal in the morning, and it's the most popular breakfast food. But I call hootenannies on that. It is no good.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you why. It's because it's sweet. Why do people love sweet things in the morning? They wake up and they want like sugary goodness, and I'm like, I don't go for that. Avocado on toast every morning.
Gotcha.
That's my jam.
Cool. That actually sounds really good. But okay, if you could actually eat cereal, would you pour the cereal first and then the milk, or the milk first and then the cereal?
Now, I was about to have a very gut reaction to this, and I'm going to just quieten down just a little bit. But what crace person puts the milk in first? What? Who does that? That's not normal. That's not normal.
I'm sorry,
Come
but
on,
you're
dude.
looking at a person that does that.
I mean, what kind of wetness ratio are you getting on that bad boy? Like, once you put the milk in and then you just powder these like chunks over the top of it that just float there, and you have to push them in. Like, it just logically doesn't make it's no use. Like at least if you're pouring the milk into the cereal, you're getting it good. You can get it all. You can get the right amount. How do you know? Okay, so if you're putting, how do you know how much milk to put in? I guess you've always done it this way, so you know. But like, my mind is like, that's how much cereal. Because I do eat cereal occasionally. It's not like I'm against the process. But like, if you put cereal in and up to a certain amount, and then you're like, okay, that's how much cereal I want. I'm just like dabbing a bit of milk in there, so I know how much to cover, and then I'm like, okay, all this is wet. This is great. I'm going to continue eating. If you're just whacking the milk in there first, then it's all arbitrary, man. You just like put your dry cereal on top. It floats. You have no idea what's going on. Oh, Lewis, breaking my mind
here. Okay. All right. So you want to go ahead and let us know one more time what the name of the game is, and approximate when the game might release and what platforms?
Okay, it is The Master's Pupil. It is a game set inside an eyeball, and it is entirely hand-painted. It's based on the life and times and art of Claude Monet. You don't have to know who he is, but he is an impressionist painter from the 1800s, and he had a very interesting life, and he makes beautiful art. And I tried to mimic the game around his artworks, and it's a puzzle game, features physics and logic puzzles and color theory, and it is coming on PC, Mac, and Switch, and it is coming very, very soon, in a couple of months or so, and you'll get your hands on it. You can wishlist it on Steam. It'll be up on the Twitch store very soon as well, and look out for me and Steam Next Fest in 2 weeks.
Sounds good. Any last words that you want to tell Pat right here, Nightmare?
Looking forward to seeing the game. Looking forward to playing it.
Thanks, my dude. Thank you.
And thank you to all the listeners that were listening out there. I appreciate everybody that actually was able to listen to. If you didn't make it to the live version of this podcast, a few days later, my editor by the name of Nicky D. Luffy, he's actually in the background editing the podcast as we speak. So he basically, will be able to actually get the podcast ready in a few days, and it'll be on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. So until then, everybody, it was a blessed day today. We hope to see y'all whenever the game comes out. We hope you enjoy it. Feel free to reach out Pat on Twitter. I posted his social. I posted the wish list link, so that way you can go ahead and give the click of a wish list, and make sure you support indie game developers, because they work harder than AAA game developers, in my opinion. So.
Maybe.
Until then,
don't sue us, Ubisoft.
This is LuisIpa signing off. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. As always, today's episode of the Reef Podcast was streamed live on Twitch. If you could not make it to the live stream of the podcast, you can always listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and iHeartRadio. Thanks for listening. See you next time.